Gentlemen, we all know about magic mushrooms. We all know about the term psilocybin, from your Graham Hancocks to your Joe Rogans to all the rest of them. And we all think of so many good things, so many of these transitory, revelationary experiences as a result of taking these substances. What I'm here to tell you today is that they are not as simple as it seems they are online. It seems like we get pushed this narrative with mushrooms by a lot of people that they are totally revolutionary and that there are real positives to taking these substances. Now, while I am not a skeptic to this, and I do agree that there are some truly profound experiences that can happen as a result of these mind altered states, I think there is by no means enough light shed on just how earth-shattering these substances can be if you're not careful. Now, just for a bit of context to see where I stand on this, I have had 4 mushroom trips in the last 4 months or so. Now, none of these experiences were with trip sitters, which in itself I will add as an important note. That is an important thing to have in some capacity. For me, I didn't want someone there in person because I recognised how fragile that state of mind was and I needed to be alone. But to have someone on the other end of the phone, as and when is required, is absolutely necessary. Also, do not take too much. There is this 5 gram dosage thing's going around. I think it hooks a lot of people because it's such an experience and it's so different that people go, oh yeah, I want to go straight into that. Don't do it. You see the fucking demons straight away. Don't do it. So what is such a problem with mushrooms? What can be so bad about mushrooms? People seem to look at the positives immediately with mushrooms because there can be, and we have been told, such profound things about these states changing to a point where you see the world in an entirely different light and you really see the positive of things, or you see the nuances for all their beauty. We often hear about these really life-changing experiences, but what we don't often hear about is how we can have the exact same effect on the converse, on the other side of that. Now, my experiences with mushrooms have frequently taken the form of certainly life-altering and life-changing experiences, but not necessarily ones that I am overly enthralled with having. I feel quite comfortable in saying that I could have got rid of 3 of the 4 trips and probably experienced basically the same amount of growth, because the prevalent theme that came with my trips, and something that I think is common for a lot of people, is that you feel everything so deeply and so profoundly, and there's no blocking. There's no nothing to stop that from going in any direction it pleases to go. One negative thought in your head can easily spiral into a real uncomfortable state of mind, and you can't get away from yourself. This was a very prevalent thought that I had during a number of my experiences, was the pain of thought can become so strong that you just want to get away, and you can't get away. There is no way to get away from your own head. And this is something Sam Harris speaks about this in his first podcast he did. It's called Drugs and the Meaning of Life. Fantastic, and will certainly help me explain my point with this if you'd like to watch that also. That you can experience such pain and such horror on a mushroom trip that it seems as though you have come to a point of insanity that is forever a part of you. It seems as though I believe Sam says the words, the door to insanity remains ajar after the experience. And that is very true. I found that, though I'm thankful for this experience, I found that one real key thing that I took away from my experience was how awful it would be to be mentally unwell. And it's because in that circumstance, in that altered state of mind, you seem to develop a really strong concept of what it means to actually be out of control of your mind. You are by all means under the force of a substance much stronger than you are, and as a result, you feel helpless and you feel very scared at times. Now, I will say, I want to keep this on the right track of talking about the negatives because that's more important. But I will say that for all the negative and the horrible experiences I have had on mushrooms, there was a silver lining to that, that it made me aware of just how good normal life is. I think it made me aware in a time that I was certainly needing to be aware that life is not about doing drugs and chasing experiences and going doing other things. I found myself when I first got into mushrooms getting quite excited about the prospect of exploring the realm, and thus did too much. Now, they made me painfully aware that actually, when you're in that state of mind and things are that heightened, that there is nothing more you would prefer than just being able to walk down the road with your friend in a stable mind, or sit and read a book, or watch the sun come up. The most basic of joys become oh so prevalent in those states because of how harrowing they can be. But I do not want people to gloss over that and forget just how harrowing they can be. So I'm going to move my chair closer. There were times in my most recent trip where I felt like the amount of pain and the amount of suffering that is open to be found in the world was so heavy and so evident that it really made me feel very nihilistic. And often people find themselves along a suicidal thought process as a result of taking psilocybin or mushrooms. Now, I'm not here to say that people take mushrooms and then kill themselves. I have no numbers to clarify or back that up. But there is a real strong feeling that can occur, and did occur for me, of the only way I can get away from myself is to be out of myself, to get away from myself. Now, I was never going to kill myself. That was never, ever, ever going to happen. But the thought definitely was in my head. It was definitely a thought of, how do I get away from this mind? I'm scared at the moment. Now, this is why I think it's so important to speak about this more, is because these experiences are not to be played around with. This is something I learned firsthand and really fucking quickly, was you can see things and feel things and know things and experience things to such an extent that it really can warp your perception of the world. Now, for me, and this is an experience I've spoken with on a number of occasions with a number of other people, and they have shared this experience, is that you can feel almost all the pain that the world has to offer in 6 hours, maybe 3 hours. And that can become so overbearing and so evident that you can actually come away from the experience with a negative perception of such pain. You can, and I did, come away from one of my experiences thinking, wow, there's so much pain in the world and I don't have any of it. I'm not a part of such awful, really damning pain that this world has to offer. How lucky I am to not have this pain. And on another scenario, I came away and was absolutely petrified at the prospect of encountering this pain. I became so aware of the fact that that pain exists that I became paranoid of it coming to me. Now, of course, some form of pain, real pain, will come to me at some point in my life. It will happen. And I feel like that mushroom trip, this is my most recent trip this happened, I feel like that experience was not, in the end, particularly helpful because I had just become so aware of pain. Now, the following days, I felt pretty good, actually. I felt really aware of the fact that I'd taken this just before Christmas, and I'd become so aware that the day after I was going out on a run with my brother, and I had sparring to go to, and I was to see my friend on that day, and I had a real joy about knowing that I had all these normal things to do and how much I actually valued these things. That persisted for a number of days following that. And that feeling was there, and there was a real value to that feeling. But what I've noticed is recently, on the back end of Christmas, just gone, I have had a natural downfall decline in my mood because I just do around Christmas. I know that things get really good, I get really happy with seeing everyone, and then all of a sudden that's gone and I seem to drop, as do a lot of people. It's the January blues, as we all know. And I think mushrooms made me kind of post aware of that. It's like the pain that I'd felt there had become evident a week later when I was feeling pain just as a cause of life. If it was almost as though the pain had compounded in some sort of way. So I do think it's very difficult to explain to someone who hasn't taken mushrooms what mushrooms makes you feel like, but it can be really joyous. I will stand for that. I will not be someone who sits here and says they're evidently a negative thing, but I'm not going to be someone who also sits and says how great they are. A minor criticism I have of someone like Joe Rogan is that he has said before that mushrooms can be a terrible thing. They can really, really impact you in negative ways, and you can see things you don't want to see. But he says about the positives far more than that. And I think there needs to be a temperance applied. Now, I will admit, I don't know the difference between doing these substances in the appropriate settings with all the appropriate caveats and being a fucking idiot and just going, oh, I'm going to take some mushrooms tonight and sit in my room. I may well have had a different experience if I did it the correct way, whatever that is. But that in itself is not something that is spoken about a great deal. I feel like people don't cast enough light on what sort of things can cause a bad trip. And from my experience, I will list a few things straight away that must be put in place. 1, have someone in the house, in the room, on the other end of the phone, someone who can link you back and pull you back to reality. And even if it's just to hear someone's voice, just to have it, or just to at least know that someone's there. I personally, I had a phone call with a friend, and I didn't need much of the call before I was actually getting a bit, I was realising I have to go through this myself. I have to go through this myself, but I know that my friend is here. I know he can, if I really need help, he's there. I knew he was there. Also, you need to be comfortable. I would strongly advise that you find a room that is warm, has bed sheets or duvets or blankets, pillows, something to keep you warm. Avoid anywhere that has a number of faces, in my opinion. My room has a lot of faces because I have pictures on the walls, I have albums, I have figures, I have a number of things that have faces. And faces really, for me, are very uncomfortable with psilocybin. I think it's quite possible that my anxieties towards myself are emphasized through these faces because they all seem to be looking at me. But that is something I would really consider on your own experience, is if you're an anxious person, get rid of the faces as best as you can. Put some fucking flowers or something there. If you need the toilet, do not wait any longer than you need to. You can sit, if you're in the middle of whatever thought process you're in the middle of, if you need the toilet, go to the toilet. Trust me. And I think it's important as well. This is something I'm glad people do make quite a point of, is you will be okay. Right? You will be okay. I read into a news feed, whatever you would call it, whilst I was on psilocybin because I was fucking terrified and I really wanted the experience to end, of how to stop a trip. And there are a few ways. You can get various chemicals, or you can do certain things to slow down the process or neuter it, what should I say. But the best advice that there was available there was, the experience will end. It will come to an end on its own. You have about, if you're really going for it, if you have a reasonable dose, you have about 8 hours of come up, which tends to be very positive in my books, the middle, which can be very challenging, and the end, which you're starting to get more and more touch with the normal world, and thus things start to feel better, and you get that stronger sense of introspection. Now, another annoying thing, and this is something I know a lot of people share, is mushrooms can put you in a state of mind where you almost feel like a genius. You feel like the problems that are in front of you, or the thoughts that are in your head, are being dealt with on such a high level, and it seems as though you can think so much clearer, so much faster, and so much stronger. It's very tempting once this feeling goes, because it does go, to go back in, go and find the experience again. And what I will tell you is this is not, categorically not, something to do. Do not go back in the day after that. Take time away from these things. They are very, very strong on the mind. They're very strong on the body as well. You feel very tired after doing these. I will also add, if you're going to have a trip, make the day after a chill day. Do not do anything particularly extravagant. Do make it a day of watching a podcast, reading a book, movie, chilling out sort of thing. Don't do it when you've got work or something like that. Please don't do it. But yeah, I think it's so easy to go back in straight away because you feel like there's something there, and there is something there. There are absolute lessons of value to be taken from these experiences, but you are not to milk them. You have to take as much as you can from one trip and move on with that. And in a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year time, you go back. These are not party substances. And this was something that I was painfully unaware of. Was I thought, oh yeah, let me just do this for a laugh. You know, I know that supposedly I can get all these psychological advancements and these spiritual breakthroughs. That's cool, but also I just want to see what it's like to see the room turn upside down. Don't do that. Seriously, don't do it. It's not worth it. As tempting as it might be, it is not worth it. Trust me. And that is one thing that is a positive out of the negative, is if you have a bad trip and you're someone who seems to either abuse or not take substance seriously, fuck me, they will very quickly kick your ass and tell you, stop playing around with me, do this stuff properly. And that's the biggest lesson that I feel can be taken away from these, is they really are not to be played with. These are not party drugs, and I'm not going to make a point about party drugs because I don't really do party drugs, but I don't really party either. But mushrooms are not that. These are not something you take for just simply a fun time. That is not to say that a fun time cannot be found. It can be, but you need to put the appropriate measures in place. You need to do these things at the right time. You need to make sure your mind is in a good state. Now, this is a misconception, is you don't have to necessarily be happy to do these things. There can be real utility in doing them when you're not. They can open you up to have a real vivid awareness of the value of life. But you don't want to be fractured in any state. You don't want to be in a state where you feel unstable. You might not feel the happiest, but do not do these things when you feel unstable. It will fuck with your mind to a point that is painfully uncomfortable. I cannot stress enough that these mushrooms can literally put you in a state of psychosis. There is no question about that. And you will quickly learn, if you play around with these substances, that they will teach you a lesson. Trust me, they will teach you a lesson. And that lesson may not be the lesson you want to learn. I am yet to come away from experience with a 100% positive case. Now, I will say that for the most part, I come away with a positive outlook as a result of the negative. You know, I might have gone through such pain and hurt that I realise, as I said before, the value that can be found in just the simplest of tasks, or just this is another thing that Sam says, that when you feel as though you've lost your mind, there is nothing you would wish more than just to be on a boring Tuesday drinking a coffee. And that there's utility in that. It makes value to the normal life potent. I would like to make a point here that it can be so easy to chase these experiences frantically. You know, you can open the door to the psychedelic world and you see such amazing, interesting, completely foreign things that are quite enthralling. And the problem that can come with this is because it's such a different world to this one, and there's so much going on there that is new and profound and interesting. It's so easy to abuse these things, and though they're not addictive in terms of chemical compound, the experience can be alluring. I wouldn't call it addictive because it's so mentally tiring that you don't want to go back, but it can be enticing in a way of, oh, well, isn't it so cool to feel this, see that. That can be a thing if you know, because it's so different to the normal world. If you are normally just walking around looking at the world and looking at it for its normality, and all of a sudden you see the room spinning around, you speak of God and the room turns into a golden chalice, you know, a room full of gold, and you see people getting held up off the side of mountains as you speak of the importance of life. When your imagination is so vivid that you can see it in front of you, there can be a real, oh, this is so cool, let me, you know, this is really cool and interesting and flash. Don't let that stand in front of the normal experience. It is absolutely integral to remember that the drug experience, whatever it may be, I'm not a seasoned substance user, fortunately, but certainly from my limited experience, this is not where life's value comes from. And it's far too easy to fall into this trap of thinking that life is to be lived for these amazing experiences. No, it's not. You have to remember that these are once in a blue moon scenarios. You have to keep them controlled in their own space. They cannot be something where you're just looking for the next time. This was an issue that I found myself in at one point ago, that you can be so enthralled by one of these experiences that you're just waiting for the next one, and you want to stay away from that train of thought as best as you can, because otherwise you're living 60 days for one day, and you know, we can do the maths, it's not the way you want to be. The value of these experiences can be found in the negative. I will make that abundantly clear. If you dare to try, I'm not going to tell you not to, because if you're going to do it, I know fully well from my own experiences that people can tell you all you want to be told, and if you want to do it, you're going to do it. Sometimes you need to get your ass kicked by these things to really recognise the power, because someone telling you about it seems almost like a dare of, oh, maybe it's not that bad. So if you have an experience following this video and it's a negative one, good. There's always value for these experiences. That's something I will put out there to the fullest, most clear extent, is there's no such thing as a bad trip in that sense. I believe someone has said words to this effect, that there's always something to be learned, even on the worst trips. So, with that being said, be careful. Don't think that these things are all rosy. Don't get the rose-tinted glasses for these substances. Psychedelics and the rose-tinted glasses is not a helpful perspective. Go in with a level of preemptive fear, caution, and respect for these substances, because they will change your mind, and you have to be careful of that. So I hope you enjoy whatever experiences you go forth with. I do not advocate any of these substances. I'll make the appropriate caveats. You are to do your own research and see what you find. Gentlemen, always a pleasure, never a chore. Love you all.